reading from the second book of Samuel. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab with his officers and Israel with him. They ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. It happened late one afternoon when David rose from his couch and was walking about on the roof of the king's house, that he saw the roof of a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. David sent someone to inquire about the woman. It was reported, "This is Bathsheba's daughter, Elam, the wife of Uriah and Hizzite." So David sent messengers to get her, and she came to him and lay with her. Now she was purifying herself after her period. Then she returned to her house. The woman conceived, and she sent and told David, "I am pregnant." So David sent word to Joab, "Send me Uriah and Hizzite." And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab and the people fared, and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." Uriah went out to the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the entrance of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house. When they told David Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, "You have just come from a journey. Why did you not go down to your house?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah remain in Booth, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will do no such thing." Then David said to Uriah, "Remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day. On the next day, David invited him to eat and drink in his presence and made him drunk. And in the evening he went out to lie on the couch with the servants of his lord, but did not go down to his house. In the morning David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, "Set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him so that he may be struck down and die." The word of the Lord.
It's a rather familiar story. It's a story that has been told for literally 3 millennia. It's a story that of late has been told and retold in film, and it's a story that has been corrupted by 3 millennia worth of theological interpretation. But it's a story, it's a story that the church must take seriously, because its implications for the church are not only powerful but profound. It was truly an afternoon of aftermath. For the choices that David made that afternoon would change the course of history irreparably. It was the quintessential turning point in David's life and the life of his family, and a snapshot of the catastrophic breakdown that became the bane on David's wonderful kingdom. The story that centered in lust and power and control and exploitation. It's also a story that is largely misinterpreted. In some cases, as this story of David and Bathsheba is told, it's told in the language of scapegoating, and specifically scapegoating onto Bathsheba. The suggestion, it's Bathsheba's fault. After all, if she wouldn't have been up there bathing on the roof, then she wouldn't have tempted David. And she is oftentimes portrayed in film and fiction as this seductress that was trying to bring down the king of Israel and to use her feminine beauty in a nefarious and destructive way. So really, this scapegoating interpretation lets David off the hook, because Bathsheba, she was the seductress in this one, and it was her fault. Sometimes the story is told in rationalizing terms where details are superimposed on the story that are not included in the narrative, and the suggestion that Uriah, he was a neglectful or an abusive husband, and some people draw the implications that he came and would not go and sleep with his wife, that he really didn't love her in the first place, suggestions that he was just not interested, or he was a bad man or an evil man, or somebody that couldn't be trusted, and therefore King David, in not only providing sexual gratification to his wife and then eliminating her husband, was doing her a grand favor, and David comes out as this wonderful Superman hero in a bad situation. And that's how some interpreters have rationalized the story. Some look at the badness, the bad qualities of the story and the poor choices that were made, but they justified it. It's okay because, as Psalm 51 clearly points out, David was remorseful and he was sorry, and he sought forgiveness and purging and purification from God. And well, yeah, it was a bad thing and it shouldn't have happened, but it's okay because God still loved David, and they justify the atrocities of this story by the ultimate anguish that David felt, as if feeling sorry for something makes it okay. And then there's also the romanticizing of this story. David fell in love with the woman of his dreams. Never mind that she was married to somebody else. Never mind that it was an act of adultery. They were in love. And this romanticizing just blows to pieces the fidelity and the sanctity of marriage. So let's be honest. Let's cut past all of the traditional glossing over of this story, trying to make it nice, and be upfront. This is not a nice story. David is an adulterer. He is a rapist, and he is a murderer. That is very clear. Christians oftentimes don't like to say that about David because we like David, the great king, the man who had God's heart, the author of most of the book of Psalms, and the father of the lineage of the kingdom that became the kingdom of Jesus Christ. We don't like to think of our great leaders of faith as being adulterers and rapists and murderers, but the story is unambiguously clear. That's who David was. David was a rapist. He was complicit to murder. And he was an adulterer. Let that sink in for just a moment as we begin to look at some of the not so subtle contrasts in this story. Earlier in 1 Samuel, when the kingdom of Israel, or the people of Israel, were ruled by judges, and they came to their leader and they said, we want a king. And Samuel said, you don't want a king. A king is a bad idea. Don't go down that road. You have God. Stay focused in God. Keep your trust in God, not in some king. And they said, oh no, Samuel, we need a king. We need a king that will lead us into battle and fight for us. And Samuel said, no, that's what you want, but that's not what you need, because a king is only going to take from you and take and exploit you to serve his own self-interests. And it won't come out for your advantage. And then we see David. They're at battle. Israel's army is at war. And their king, whom they wanted to lead them into battle and fight for them, is at home in Jerusalem. living in luxury, and enjoying life. Their king, who they wanted to be their leader, was now taking for his own gratification and exploiting for his own self-satisfaction. He takes Bathsheba and he takes Uriah's life. Complete denial of human dignity, but also a prophetic fulfillment of what Samuel had said a generation earlier. This is what will happen if you place your trust in a king, rather than centering your hope solely on God. For the king was interested in power and control and conquest. You know, when I used to teach history at the college, I would ask my students, and I'll ask you, what are the top 3 reasons why people go to war? What do you think? Power, yeah?
To make money.
To make money. Those are 2. What's the third one?
Religious conflict.
Well, I'm glad you said religious conflict, because that is what the answer I was looking for, even though I know it's not the right answer. Because that's what everybody says. Oh, people go to war for God. God and country, right? That's why we go to war. And one of the challenges that we have is to separate religion from global conflict. Because all of the major religions, Christianity included, disavow the violence and the sin that is war. But it is really easy to justify our nefarious endeavors and our passions and our desires by branding it with religion. The top 3 reasons that people go to war are money, power, and real estate. Think about it. We want more money, so we'll invade your country and we can exploit your resources. We want more control, so we'll invade your country so we can control more people. We want power, we want real estate, we want to expand our borders, or we want to wall off our borders because we're paranoid or whatever it may be. So we engage in warfare. But that's all greed and lustful and power. But then when you attach God to it, oh, well, that's okay because this is the name of God. And a lot of times, I think this is what happens when people with power and control become drunk on their own authority and think that God is going to bless them no matter what, regardless of the immorality of their choices. And this is where David found himself at this moment. He was so drunk on his own position and prominence and power and control that he saw no problem with taking Bathsheba as his own, even though she was not his to have. And in contrast, let's look at Bathsheba's husband, Uriah. Contrary to some of the justification and the rationalization that paints Uriah as this bad person, Uriah's very name in Hebrew means God is my light. There's symbolic significance to that. So here we have the man whose heart is of God and God is my light, but their actions speak louder than their words. David looks out in lust and takes what is not his for his own selfish gain, and then consumes and destroys a life over which he has authority to preserve, but does so to protect his own image, his own influence, his own standing. Whereas Uriah, whose men are in battle and is called back from the front lines by the king with the opportunity to go and enjoy the blessing of marital relations with his wife, says very clearly, no, it is not fair to the men who look up to me that they are putting their lives on the line in battle and I'm at home enjoying the blessings of marital bliss. No, I will stay here, and I will be loyal to the men who count on me. And when this war is over, then I can come home and enjoy my wife. David didn't like that answer because it wasn't going to serve his purpose of hiding the unexpected pregnancy. And for this, Uriah was killed. The contrast is explicit. And then for this afternoon of aftermath, David's family began to crumble. And in the years to come, as the Old Testament narrative plays out, David's family would experience rape and murder and rebellion and destruction, disintegration and demise. This one afternoon choice destroyed David's family. And in fact, by the time David's yet unborn and at this point unconceived son, Solomon, takes the throne, every one of David's sons will die a violent death, all stemming from the aftermath of a night of lustful, adulterous sex. All because David chose to rape a person rather than affirm humanity. And if anybody would ever question, and people have, the use of the word rape, let it be clear. David's the king. A woman in that part of the time, that world, and that country had no authority whatsoever. And the king calls a woman to his bedchambers and said, let's do this. She doesn't have a choice. She has no choice whatsoever. She can't say yes, she can't say no. All she can say is nothing. It's rape. That's why Paul tells us in the New Testament that we are to live by the Spirit, not by the flesh. And as I read this story of this afternoon of aftermath and see how David's lustful desires created so many problems that would encompass the entire rest of his earthly life and continue to plague Israel for generations and generations to come, let us not forget what Paul said 1,000 years later. Paul says in Galatians 5, live by the Spirit, not to gratify the desires of the flesh. Isn't that what David did? Satisfy the desires of the flesh. For what the flesh desires is opposed to the Spirit, and what the Spirit desires is opposed to the flesh. For these are opposed to each other to prevent you from doing what you want. But, Paul says, if you're led by the Spirit, you are not subject to the law. And here's where it gets down to nuts and bolts. The works of the flesh are obvious. Fornication, impurity, lasciviousness, idolatry, sorcery, enmities, strife, jealousy, anger, quarrels, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these. All of the garbage that destroyed David's family, his kingdom, and the kingdom of Israel for generations to come. All because of one afternoon of lustful abandonment. By contrast, Paul says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against such things. And this is where the power of the story comes in. It would be very easy to judge and moralize David and point fingers at him and pat ourselves on the back because We've never gone out and raped somebody and tried to have their spouse killed. At least I hope not. But this says far more than just denouncing the catastrophic consequences of adultery and sexual conquest. Because this David's story is our story. Let it not be forgotten. We may not be king of a country, but in Christ we have power. Christ gives Christians unrelenting power. A power that can be used in so many ways to enhance and beautify the world. Yet how many times have we found situations where Christians have abused the power that Christ has given them to satisfy their own lustful desires or their passions for power and wealth or greed or real estate or sex or whatever, and done so in the name of Christ, justifying religion to satisfy their own selfish, nefarious, and sinful deeds. We also have power because we are citizens of one of the most powerful and influential nations in the world. But are we going to let our nation use its power in this world to serve its own selfish interests or to serve the world with God's love? Especially if we have the audacity to call ourselves a Christian nation. We have power as women and men of influence to change the world. So we can satisfy our own selfish needs. Or we can follow the calling of Christ and serve. We are called to heal the nations, not to destroy them. We are called to help one another, not build walls and fences to decide who gets to come in and who has to stay out. We are called to serve one another, not to judge one another. We may not be guilty of the exact same crimes that God finds David guilty of committing. But we are people of power and prominence who have the opportunity to choose. What's going to be our central focus? Jesus Christ or ourselves? What's going to be our purpose and meaning? To advance the gospel of Jesus Christ or to serve our own self-interests? As a church, what's going to be our direction and focus? To turn inward and protect our own, or to reach outward and serve others? The reality is, as men and women called in the name of Christ, it's about us serving the world. More importantly, it's about Jesus. It's all about Jesus. Let us serve Christ today and be the power of healing for all the nations.